What is the Buddhist practice? By Venerable Rung Ruang Papa's Sorrow, Dr. Rung Ruang Lim Chu Patipa. When speaking of religious practice, many people may have the general perception of performing a religious ceremony to attain a kind of supernatural power to be able to see spiritual world, or to make such a communication with spirits or God. However, the Buddhist practice is different from the others in the sense that the Buddha carefully distinguishes the Buddhist practice from the others, which are sorts of supernatural or miracle practices, by the introduction of the study concept in threefold strategy, namely morality study, mind study, and wisdom development. This was a new breakthrough concept of religious practice in ancient time, and it was the first time that we searched for the truths of life instead of waiting for an answer from any unknown entity. The core concept of Buddhist practice is based on the threefold study strategy guiding to observe the inside of the mind to see what is really happening as it is. It was the first time we came to realize that there was a stream of consciousness, and also there was the mind processing acting as being alive. This mind processing is a series of changing state of mind that is dependently changed from one state to another state. This pattern of mind processing is called the process of dependent origination, that functions essentially like an operating system of mind. This discovery led to a path and way to enlightenment to understand the reality of life, and then by applying the Four Noble Truth analysis to this mind processing as it really is, then we can gain knowledge to resolve all kinds of mental problems and make an end of suffering in life. The Buddha enlightenment was the greatest discovery about the truths of life within nature. This is the universal knowledge for everyone of any religions, and anyone who study the truths of life within nature, then makes use of this knowledge to improve the quality of life, and then the mind will be liberated, and this is the Buddhist way to make an end of suffering in life. This cognitive development of mind in Buddhism is sort of introspective learning, starting by establishing mindfulness to study the truths of life within nature by performing insight observation to experience the reality of how the mind functions as it really is, and then by applying the Four Noble Truths to analyze the collective data from observation, and turning the discovery to be knowledge. This part of the path and way for knowledge development is called the enlightenment, and then by making use of these knowledge for the destruction of all kinds of defilements within the mind, and this is the Buddhist way to purify and liberate the mind from any troubling problem in life by wisdom. And this is the reason why the Buddhism is the only pragmatic religion in the world. In ancient time, without the invention of fMRI and some other scientific equipment as we have in the study on human connectome nowadays, it seemed to be impossible to make any observation to see what is happening inside the mind. Fortunately, the Buddha discovered a special quality of mind, so-called mindfulness, to be aware of the state of mind in the present moment, and by keeping on establishing the mindfulness, then we can monitor the mind processing in terms of a series of changing states of mind. This was one of the greatest discovery of the Buddha that led to the way to investigate how the life functions as a mind processing, and the Buddha realized that this was the path and way to enlightenment to explore the truths of life within nature, the Dharma. Although there were so many kinds of religious practices during the Buddha time, and the Buddha had already experienced most of them, but the Buddha found out that those practices were not the path and way to enlightenment. So he left those mantra practices and he began a new way of practice by recalling that when his father the Sakyan was occupied, while he was sitting in the cool shade of a rose apple tree, he realized the enlightenment factor of mindfulness, which was based upon seclusion from sensual pleasures, seclusion from unwholesome states, and by establishing mindfulness to abandon such unwholesome states, he entered and dwelled in the first jhana, which was accompanied by thought and examination, with rapture and happiness born of seclusion. This was the breakthrough way that the Buddha entered upon and dwelled in this Dharma by realizing it with direct knowledge, so-called the enlightenment. The Buddha developed a new special technique modified from his enlightenment to be the Buddhist practice, so-called the practice to follow the footprint of the Buddha as the universal methodology for everyone to be able to follow and to study the truths of life within nature. Therefore, there is no need to adopt any mantra practice into the Buddhist practice. The practice of the footprint of the Buddha is the benchmark of Buddhist practice. The Buddha was the first one who made use of mindfulness to observe what is happening inside the mind, and for this reason, the word insight observation simply means making use of mindfulness to see the inside of the mind, and as a result the enlightenment is simply establishing mindfulness to see the truths of life within nature, and the Buddhist practice is the path and way to perform experimental scientific study on the mind. Clearly, the Buddhist practice is not a miracle, mantra practice as they are in most conventional religious practice, but it is a pure systematic study on the truths of life within nature. In principle, the system of Buddhist practice consists of 4 parts as follows. 1. The establishment and empowerment of mindfulness as an insight tool to perform insight observation. 2. The insight observation. 3. The knowledge development as instructed cognition. 4. The application of the knowledge for the destruction of the taints and all kinds of defilements, so that the mind is liberated. In Buddhism, having Buddhist study without practice can be compared essentially like seeing a picture of apple in painting, but no matter how good the painting may be, those who never really eats and tastes the apple before, then they will have no way to be able to explain the favor of apple rightly. The Buddha encouraged everyone to perform the Buddhist practice in similar to the way he experienced on the day of his enlightenment, so that we can realize the truths of life. The Buddhism is a pragmatic religion that requires both theoretical and experimental studies to fulfill the introspective learning for the implementation of the knowledge for mind development. The early Buddhism is based on facts and science. It is a universal knowledge for everyone, not limited to the Buddhists only, and the Buddha explained that as long as there are people still studies on these subjects, that is, the concept of nature in element, the 6 sense bases of how life interfacing with the world, and the process of dependent of origination as an operating system of life, then the knowledge of Buddhism and Buddhism will last forever. The Buddhism is not concerned about gods, meeting with gods, getting blessing from gods, or even to be a god. The heartwood of Buddhism is the study on the truths of life within nature, and then makes use of this knowledge to make an end of suffering in life. The Buddha is not worried about how long Buddhism will last, because as long as people still search for the truths of life within nature, then there will be a chance that this Buddhist knowledge will be available. And no matter there is a Buddhism or not, the world is the world, and all beings are still living in a circle of life under the law of nature. The purpose of Buddhism is to share the Buddha's knowledge that he earned on the day of his enlightenment to public, and those who can understand this knowledge, then this knowledge will be beneficial and relevant to the fundamentals of spiritual life. This knowledge will lead to disenchantment, to purification, to liberation, to peace, to direct knowledge for enlightenment, and this is a way leading to the Nibbana.